So when you set these up, some of the first things that you're doing is creating those different rounded rectangles, rounded squares, and it shows you some of the tools and techniques to do this. Remember, we've turned on things like our bounding box and our little widget, and if you need to zoom in, Command and plus sign lets you do that. I will say this, get it as close as possible. One thing that came up was this had to be like a 12-point radius from here. It's very difficult when I click and drag to get it exactly at 12 point, maybe like 11.91. I'm okay with that, as long as it's close to it. I'm not going to go and double check little details like that. But once you created a variety of these, one of the things it's going to ask you to do is to do some transformations to place it in specific spots. And this is a common thing that we do in order to get perfect vector forms. Sometimes you need to be able to place things and use things very precisely, and the transform tools allow you to do this. One of the things that, since you're working on a large screened desktop, that may not show up on your screen, but it's in the book, are the transform options at the very top. Right now, if you look up here, of course I get my colors and my strokes and styles. On this side, I've got my shape options, and if I click on the word, it'll give me these dialog boxes. And I've also got here's my X and Y coordinates, my height and width. In the book, however, it's going to ask you to click on the word transform. Do y'all see the word transform up here? It's not up there. Let me show you what's happening. I'm going to turn on my application window. Usually I have this turned off. This is just going to put everything inside its own window. Watch up here as I scale down my work area. See what's happening? It's starting to compress and condense all the information up here. If you're working on a laptop, you've got a smaller screen, it's going to compress it and you can actually see the word transform. And so I can click on it and open it up. So one thing to note, if you're working on a different computer, a larger or smaller screen, some of your tools may look a little bit different up here in your control of your tool options. If I bring it back out, come on. Oh, come on, there we go. It'll just expand out and it'll give me those options from here. I'm going to turn off my application frame. Don't need that. So, I do have a transform palette by itself, and remember I can go to Window and find easily some of these transform tools. Some of the things that you can do with multiple objects is place them specifically and align them with each other. In this case, let's say I wanted each of these to be exactly 1/4 of an inch from the edges of my page. A couple of things I need to know is, well, where's 1/4 of an inch? How do I know exactly where that is? I need to turn on my rulers and I need to be able to see my guides to work with. I don't see any rulers right now, but here's how to turn it on. Under View, you've got an option for rulers and Show Rulers. Notice Command R is the keyboard shortcut that I'm working with. Hey, what unit of measure are we working in? Say it loud. Points. We're working in points. So you see up here, this isn't good old-fashioned American inches. These are points that I'm measuring in. Here's a quick way to change from point unit of measure to inches or any other type of thing. You can hold down Control and click on the ruler itself. It gives me a pop-up option, and I can choose inches. And you can see now it's converted to good old-fashioned inches the way the Lord intended. Pretty cool? From here, this is going to make it easier for me to type things in. Also notice when I start selecting objects in my transform tool, it changed my unit of measure inside of here as well. I'm no longer measuring in points, I'm measuring in inches from here. This will save you a little bit of time rather than having to go up to your preferences and change the units up here. That's one quick way of doing it. So, I've got this first one selected. I want it to be 1/4 of an inch from the top and 1/4 of an inch from this side. When I move over here, the first thing I do need to pay attention to is what point is it relative to. In this case, I'm going to keep it at the top left corner because I want that to be my 1/4 of an inch. My X and Y location is what I want to move it to. Now the X-axis, is that left and right or up and down? Left and right, horizontal plane, your X-axis. So this point right here, if I was to type in 0.25 inches and I hit return, you can see it moved along there. Up and down is my y-axis. I'll move this over here so we can keep it together. Watch as I type in 0.25 in there. And so now you can see this point is exactly left and right, top to bottom, 0.25. Pretty cool? Let's do the same thing for this one. I'm going to move it 1/4 of an inch from this area and 1/4 of an inch from the top. So if I moved it 1/4 of an inch up, 0.25. And since this is 8.5 and I'm backing up 1/4 of an inch, what should my measurement be? 7.5?
7.75, sorry.
No. 8.25. 8.5 minus 0.25. 8.25. Who says you didn't have to know math as a graphic designer? Now type this in. Uh-oh. What went wrong? It went outside the paper. Huh? Say it.
The top left corner is
There you go. Now you're using it. My reference point was wrong. Notice my reference point was still at the top right-hand corner. I typed it in right. Where should it be?
in the top right corner.
Top right-hand corner. Now let's try this again. 8.25. Now it's perfect. This is why those reference points are very, very important to remember. When you type it in and it's still going off, check your reference point. That's a common thing that happens. The other ones, so we're going to make this really, really simple. I want the rest of these to also be nice and in line with this. This is where our alignment palette can come in handy. There is an alignment palette by itself, and it looks like this. If you do have just your selection tool selected, I don't see them up here. Let's see. If I select multiple objects, I'm going to click and drag over it. There we go. All of these are now selected. Check out what I have in my tool options up here. These alignment icons are the same thing that are down here. And if you look at them closely, they'll give you an idea of what it will do. In this case, we want to align them. We want to have them all lined up perfectly parallel with each other. Which one of these will give me perfect parallel on here? Middle one. Which middle one?
Sorry. Excuse me. So there's, this is really difficult to explain.
Okay.
Where your mouse is right now,
Yeah.
just go down a little bit.
Awesome. Perfect. That's middle on the right. I know exactly what you're talking about. Very good. If I clicked on that, notice now they're all aligned perfectly from here. What did I lose, though? Lost my vertical alignment. Exactly. This is where I would go up to my transform, and maybe I'd have to retype in my y coordinate to get it exactly back up there. The distribution talks about how they're distributed amongst each other. And right now you can see some of these are farther away and some of them may even be closer. I'll even overlap that one to prove my point. For this one, it can be a little bit tricky because when I select it, I want them evenly distributed between each of the shapes. Here's the option that you got to make sure you select. If you look under the Align or the Pathfinder, I'm going to show my options, and you can see I get a little bit more info to pick from. Align to is going to be very important. Align to selection simply means whatever you have selected, that's the group it's going to align to. You can also do it to a key object. I'll show you that one, and to the artboard itself. But for this one, I'm going to keep it as selection. I want all of these to be equally aligned. And in this case, we're going to distribute them horizontally perfectly from there. Now check out what I got. See how they're equally spaced? Pretty cool. I could actually add more shapes to here. I'm just going to quickly draw off some. And if I select all of these, if I want them to be equally spaced with each other, do distribute. And even though they're different sizes, their points are all equally distributed. The problem is it's not visually pleasing for that. So let's do this the way it was intended. What you're going to be doing with these icons is I want each of the icons centered inside of here. And we can do this using the alignment method. Let's say I had this one. Select my picnic icon and select this one. What I want to be able to do is to move this one on top of here. I want this to move relative to this position. So I'm going to align it to a key object. The key object being this one. Notice when I selected that, what happened to this icon? How did it change?
Got a red X.
Got a red X, got really bold. If I click on this one, do you see how this one got a bold blue line on it? The boldness means that's your key object. And so when I start to align it, for instance, I'm going to align it vertically centered, then horizontally centered. You see how it quickly aligned to there. I can do the same thing. Let's do it for the fire. I'm going to put it over here. Again, I'm going to click again on this one. See how it turned bold? I've got it aligned to the key object. I'm going to align it vertically and horizontally to that point. Do the same for this one, and this one. If I didn't have key objects selected, let's say I kept it to the selection, and then I did this, that's what's going to happen. That means they're just aligning to their own selected selves. We do want a key object, and we want to select this one to be my key object. Do and a do. Last one.
Can you only select it, like double click to make it a key object when that option's turned on, or will clicking only just deselect it?
I think only when that one is turned on. Notice if I click it again, excuse me, looks like they've changed up. If I do click it again, it will select it as the key object. And you can see I can move back and forth. If I had this one selected and I started doing the key object, what's going to move?
The box.
The box itself. Bingo. I don't want that. Select it, make sure the key object is there. So alignment, distribution, these are things that tend to come in very, very handy for what you're working with. Let's see. I'll close that out. We'll continue moving on. Notice my layers, how I've got this set up. This is the way the book is going to ask you to set it up. All of my little icons are in one layer. My background squares are on their own layer. If I lock up these icons, I can no longer click on them. What am I selecting in this case? The boxes. I'm selecting the background layer. So I'm going to lock that one up as well. I'm going to do all my drawings in a new layer that I called Icon Art. Now I can't select them. I can't make any changes to those other layers. Some of the other tools that they had, I'm going to emphasize these two. The newest version of Illustrator has a new tool called the Shaper tool. I kind of introduced you to this. If you don't see it, it's hiding under your pencil tool over in your toolbox palette. With the Shaper tool, you can very quickly draw off a simple rough shape like a triangle, and it automatically makes that shape for you. And in this case, it's going to be just a regular isosceles triangle. The best part about this is if I continue drawing on top of it, made another shape, and I can do a little squiggle line, and that tells Illustrator to erase it away. So I can do multiple shapes, and you see how they were overlapping, they interact with each other. I can very quickly make that shape. Pretty cool? Here's some other things you can do with this particular tool. Still got it selected. When I hover over it, you can still see the ghost outline of that first triangle that I made. Illustrator still remembers those vector points. And if I need to change that vector point, let's say I didn't draw it in the right shape or the right place, I can click on the line and it goes into an editing mode. I've got a bounding box, and remember with that bounding box you can change the height and width of an object. You can move it around. Just make sure you don't click off of it. I've even got my corner widgets. I can round a rectangle and move it around this way. This little icon right here, the little star, allows me to add or subtract points. So I can change it from a triangle to a multi-sided polygon by clicking and dragging the number of sides. That's actually pretty cool. And move it around and place it as necessary. So instead of having just a regular, Command Z, by the way, will undo whatever you have. So instead of having a regular TP, now I've got like a space TP or something. Let's go back to the way it should be. But clicking there allows me to edit it. Clicking off of it will go back into normal editing mode. And I can continue to move these around and place things in place. That's what you'll be doing and creating for this particular object. The one that I like to use is my pencil tool. And you're going to use the pencil tool to draw freeform shapes. Now this is the kind of shape that our regular shapes can't really make. I can't use a rectangle or a star or anything else to draw this form. I've got to be able to quickly draw it off. And to do that, I'm going to use my pencil tool. Remember, if you click and hold on these icons, you can get all the other ones, and there's my pencil tool underneath it. The pencil tool allows you to click and drag and freehand draw vector lines. All I had to do is click and draw, computer follows my path, and when I'm done, I get a vector line. I can even use my white arrow tool. I can move these vector lines around. Hey, did anybody figure out the name of these handles?
Handles?
These little handles that control my curvature. I was asking about that last time. I'll give you this one. This is called Bezier handles. Bezier handles allow you to control the curvature of a line as you move them around. Again, I can use my black arrow and it still sees it as a large object, and of course I can change the size and rotation of it. But here's what we can do with our pencil tool. If you double click on most of the tools you have, in this case I'm going to double click on the pencil, this will bring up some options for that particular tool. And the pencil tool has some very important options to pay attention to. First of all, there's the Fidelity. Fidelity simply means how true to your original line it's going to be. Usually by default it's set somewhere in the middle. But you can see I can make it more accurate or more smooth. Watch what happens if I draw a circle and I've got it set to being more accurate. Just going to very quickly draw that off. Notice how many points are there. There's a lot of them. It's going to take a lot of points to make an accurate circle drawing. But if I was to draw the same one, again, double click, under Smooth, I'll draw it over here. Check out how many points this one has. A lot fewer, right? If you compare the two. It'll give you a much smoother, almost cartoonish kind of feel if you set it to smooth, versus if you need a really accurate, detailed drawing. That's the kind of setting that you would want to have. How many of y'all read the comic Dilbert? Yeah, I love Dilbert. Scott Adams does those. He draws all of his cartoons now using Adobe Illustrator, and he was talking about how he sets up his pen tool, or pencil tool, excuse me, to be able to draw these freehand, and it actually feels and looks like his normal cartoonish style. But he can do this, and he gets those perfect lines every time very quickly because it's done as vector. Some of the other options that are part of the pencil tool will fill them in as a normal color if you have a fill color selected. So in this case, if I was to choose red and I draw it off, now it'll fill it in with whatever fill color that I have. Usually, for me personally, I keep this unchecked. If I'm using the pencil tool, I want to get my lines actually drawn. I do always keep it selected. Here's the other two ones that come in handy. Close the path if it's within certain pixels, and edit the path. Here's what this means. If I was to draw a line, say I drew a circle, do you see the little star that's next to my icon? Watch it change as I get closer to the opening in my beginning. Do you see it turn into a circle? When I get close to it, it automatically closes off that path. Circle, close to the beginning, it'll close it off. If I'm not close enough, if I stopped right here, you can see that path will still remain open. And so that's what the option for close the path within, you can tell it how many pixels you want to be within. For the edit selected paths, in this case, if I started drawing a line and I stopped drawing, I unclicked my mouse. If I started drawing again, it'll just start a new vector line. But if I wanted to continue and add on to that line, watch it change as I get closer to it. The star goes to a line. Now when I click and drag, it adds on to it. And I can continue drawing along with this. If I move my mouse too far and start drawing, you can see it'll pick up and create a new one. So the pencil tool, very, very powerful, very important tool to know about, but understanding what you're doing with the lines tends to come in handy. If I was doing some hatching kind of quick, almost rain type texture, watch what happens if I try doing that with this one. You can see some of these tend to pick up and some of them don't. And I don't really want it to continue. I wanted a bunch of little lines, and so with it selected, it's actually just adding on to some of the lines. Versus if I turned off edit selection, I can very quickly get all the lines, and they're not going to connect with each other no matter what I do. That's what that particular option comes in handy. Let's go back to the flame. We'll turn both of these on, get rid of what I have. Ooh, here's another keyboard shortcut that's really cool. I've got my pencil tool selected. I want to be able to quickly move over to this area. I'm well aware that the little scroll wheel on your mouse sometimes sticks. It's difficult to move around with it. If I hold down my space bar, watch my icon change. Space bar held down, I get a little hand. I can click and drag, and that hand will move my artboard around. And when I let go of the space bar, it goes back to my pencil tool. This will work for whatever tool you have selected. So very often you'll see me move around by hitting my space bar and then zooming in to exactly where I need to go. Pretty cool? Okay, let's go back to here. Let's draw this off. With this, I can click and drag. Very quickly. Again, you can do a better job. This drive is going to go quick. Getting out all the details. Hey, since this is a really detailed drawing, should this be set to smooth or accurate fidelity?
Accurate. The middle.
Obviously, I had it set to smooth, and you can see this is what it looks like. If it was more accurate, some of these extra little things would have shown up a little bit better. You're right, you could keep it on the middle and split your difference, whatever you do. But in this case, I think if I drew that with accuracy set, it would look a little bit more like a flame. But I've got my general drawing off. You guys are going to do a lot better than what I just did quickly. Hey, if I wanted to quickly change my outline to a fill color, what's one way I can do it? Did anybody get to that? Talk about swapping up your colors. Notice that I've got no fill, but I've got a black stroke. I want to swap that up. I want a black fill with no stroke. This icon allows you to swap what you have. And you can see very quickly it swaps it up from what you have right there. So that's one way of doing this. Now I'm not done yet. I've still lost a little detail that's up here. So let's draw in that extra little flame bit. Oops, excuse me, grab my pencil tool. Connect it up. Since I didn't have anything selected for my fill, you can see now it's typed right here. If I was to place this inside of here, you really can't see it, right? I mean, it's a black object or a black filled object on top of it. I could make it white. Excuse me, let's do the fill color as white. And you can at least see it this way. But that's not exactly what I want to do. What I would really like to do is to cut a hole inside of my bigger flame with this smaller flame. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to create what's called a compound object. Compound objects simply mean you've got two different objects that are going to combine as one. And in this case, since it's inside of it, it's actually going to stamp it out, kind of like stamping out the hole of a donut. I've got them both selected, so my black, my white inside area. I can go to Object, down at the very bottom, Compound Path, and we'll make it. Notice, what's my keyboard shortcut? Command 8, yes. Check out what I got now. When it's a compound path, it's not just white, it's actually transparent to what I'm working with. Pretty cool?
If you had filled up that white bit with a different color and compound, would that have still made it clear? What did that?
Hey, let's see what happens.
White.
So I undid everything I did. Let's make that red. Let's make the fill color red. So I've got red and I've got black. Object, compound path, make. It chooses the color of the one that's farthest down, one that's behind everything else is what I'm trying to say. Good question. It's only going to pick one color, and it's usually the first one in the stacking order of things that you've created. If I ever needed to edit this little path, you can break apart compound paths. So I can always go to Object, back to this, and release it. You can see it did lose its color that it originally had, but then again I can select it, and I can modify it, make it larger or smaller, and then remake it. Command 8, and then I've placed it in there. Pretty cool? So those are a little bit more of the advanced tools that you can create with this type of stuff. The other ones, remember, you're going to be turning in all 8 of these, so don't just stop at the 4 that the book covers. Do each one of these individually. The book will cover certain things like working in preview mode. I will show you this. From time to time, if you need to see not the artwork, but the actual outlines, the vector lines that you're creating, and you want to get rid of all the fill colors and stroke colors, you need to go into what's called, I think it's outline mode. Right now we're in preview mode. It previews what it looks like. To change over to outline mode, this is under View, and the first option is now Outline. This is what outline looks like. Notice now I can't really see any of the fill colors. I do see my templates as my JPEGs. It will show you that. But the outlines of everything else is just that. All I'm seeing are those vector lines. And if I wanted to, I can move the anchor points and work just within that. Sometimes this comes in handy if I need to see exactly what I'm creating and other objects or other colors are getting in my way. If I need to go back to preview mode, simply going back to View and GPU Preview will generate the color preview that we're normally used to working in. All cool? All right, I'm going to turn it back over to y'all and give you all the rest of this time to be able to work on this. Questions?